Approved. Supervisor Sutherland.
Second.
Mr. Wiederson. Any comments, questions, or corrections? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes from April 27th, 2026. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item 4, communication and announcements from staff and board members. First of all, are there any people on the committee with anything this morning? Anything from staff? Seeing none. Item A, welcome new member, Supervisor Brandon Buchanan. I guess we'll save that welcome till the next meeting. Item B, new conservation specialist, agronomy, that's Casey Bennett. Casey, welcome. Would you like to say a little bit on your behalf?
Yeah, excited to be here today. I think the last time you had a work group meeting, I was at orientation, so I've not been around too long yet, but just excited to be here and get to work.
Great, welcome, glad to have you.
And Casey, just to jump in, the only reason I hired him is because he's a Rock County resident already. He didn't have to move and he could start really quick.
Yeah.
And he lives around the corner from Colleen, so it's pretty ironic. So yeah, very happy with having Casey on board, that's for sure.
Good deal. All right. Item 5, Wisconsin Nitrogen Optimization Pilot Program. A, guest presenters Susan Mockert, Conservation Grants Unit Supervisor with DATCAP, and Megan Blowett, right? Okay, Megan. Nitrogen Management Outreach Specialist with Extension. So if you want to take it off.
Thank you for having us. How are we gonna?
What's the best? We have slides.
Can you email them to me or else join the meeting? Because if I gotta stay connected so I can run the Teams meeting, because we don't have we're only hardline connected.
Yeah, I can join the Teams.
Yeah, why don't you do that and I'll make you a host.
Is Monday morning your typical meeting time?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, never schedule anything on Monday morning, right? That's my motto. But you're here. Oh, yeah.
You're here, right?
Yeah, but I'm here.
Not a lot of conflict with other meetings.
Right, no. On Friday afternoon, too.
So you should be able to, you're listed as a presenter, so you should be able to share your screen out. We don't use Teams too often, so I'm not as familiar with the controls. There we go.
There we go. Okay. Well, thank you for having us. We are excited to be here on this early Monday morning. It's a beautiful day for a little drive down from Madison. I'm Susan Locker. I'm the Conservation Grants Unit Supervisor, so I work with the Soil and Water Resource Management Grants, PREP, and OPP. The Cover PREP program, I've also worked with producer-led in the past, so questions about grants, I'm happy to chat about any of them. But today we're talking about NOPP. Next slide, please. Thank you. The idea for NOPP came about during the 2019 Task Force on Water Quality and Climate Change. Basically drawing on two things. First of all, nitrates are a problem in groundwater across the state that needed to be addressed. And second of all, looking at the success of the producer-led groups and the power of having any producer-led effort to address environmental issues across the state. Putting those two together, the legislator came up with the NOPP, Nitrogen Optimization Pilot Program. It's still a pilot program 5 years in. We'll let that be. It was signed into law as 2021 Act 223 in March of 2022. Small print there. That is a copy of some of the language from the law itself. It's very general. It basically says we're going to give grant recipients funding to look at to receive a grant to implement a project for 2 years to optimize the application of commercial nitrogen. That is all the rule says. So we talked to a lot of people about how are we going to take this very general language and make it into a program. We spoke with UW, we spoke with different, like the Corn Growers Association, the Potato Growers Associations. We talked with agronomists at UW, we talked to private agronomists, and we finally came up with the idea of on-farm research, creating data that would contribute to the statewide nitrate recommendations, or the A 2809. So that's what we've been trying to do for the past few years. I think it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun to watch and to see how different ideas that have come to us from producers, working with their agronomists, working with UW Extension, to see how can we take this idea and make it into something. It's been very interesting to see all the different pathways. So very general overground, 2019 program was recommended by the task force, 2022 signed into law. In the first few rounds of awards, we've awarded $1.6 million in grants, 64 projects funded to date, 123 producers involved. A total of $4.4 million has been awarded over 4 cycles. We will be opening the 5th cycle in October of this coming year. We have another $1 million to allocate during that cycle, so looking forward to seeing more projects. And Megan's going to give you some more information about projects that have been in this part of the world.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. So, like mentioned, my name is Megan Blawa. I work with UW Extension in nitrogen management, and I would say NOPP is primarily what I work with. But I wanted to start today by giving perhaps a little bit more of a background. Can I get just like a show of hands? Who's familiar with the nitrogen cycle or has heard of it or studied it? Okay. So I'm still going to give a brief overview. This is really important to start with the nitrogen cycle and a bit of background, and then lead into our projects and what we study and why it's important, why it's complex. So with the nitrogen cycle, or any cycle, the important thing about the forms of nitrogen in the soil, the inputs, outputs, and then all the internal processes or transformations. So the forms of nitrogen in the soil, you see so there's 2 inorganic or unavailable to plant forms, or available, nitrate and ammonium are the 2 forms that plants can uptake. And there's also this organic nitrogen form, this orange circle there, and that's unavailable to plants. So that is the largest form of nitrogen in the soil. So within the soil, there are these transformations that take place that can transform the organic into inorganic, so make unavailable forms available to plants. And that is mediated by microbes. When I was taught the nitrogen cycle, that was a big black box, because a lot of it's very unknown. It's very hard to predict, because microbes in the soil, as many of you know, are not easy to measure or know what they're going to do on a year-to-year basis. Depends a lot on the soil temperature, soil moisture, and just the amount of microbes and what they do in the soil. So that's a really important part of the nitrogen cycle, and why it's complex, why we need to study on a site-to-site, across the states and different regions. It varies quite a bit. There are other things that are very important in the nitrogen cycle, such as the losses. That's part of why nitrogen is so important to study, because it has great environmental detriments if it is lost, such as leaching to groundwater, which all of you are likely very familiar with. There's also denitrification, where nitrate can be transformed into nitrous oxide, which is a greenhouse gas. There's also volatilization, erosion, other losses. And so in NOPP, we like to focus on things we can control, such as the inputs, specifically looking at the commercial nitrogen fertilizers. That's what farmers will apply to fields. That's the main focus of what we study, but it's also important to consider other inputs such as manure, organic fertilizers, and things like that. So that's just kind of like a brief overview. There's a lot of things going on in the nitrogen cycle, but those are the main things we want to think about. So once you understand how nitrogen cycles in the soil, the complexity of it, we can start thinking about management. And so within management, I like to think about the 4 R's of nutrient stewardship. Who has heard of these before? Yes, good show of hands. Okay, not too many, so we'll go through them. So 4 R's of nutrient stewardship are the right time, right place, right source, and right rate. So these are the 4 considerations when you're trying to be efficient, especially with nitrogen, try to be as efficient as possible with the fertilizer you're adding to the soil, and try to minimize losses. So if we go through each of these, if we start with the right time, so we really want to be applying fertilizer close to the time that plants are going to take up that fertilizer. And especially with nitrogen, this is the most efficient way so you can minimize the losses over the season when the crop is not growing or taking that nutrients up yet. Such as applying anhydrous ammonia in the fall, there's quite a bit of gap of time before the plants are going to be taking up that nitrogen, so there's a lot of potential for loss. So in this specific picture I have, this is corn this year in the field I was at that's around tassel, and you can see a lot of nitrogen deficiency. The bottom of the plant is quite yellow, leaves are dying prematurely. That's a good thing. This was a nitrogen trial, that's what we wanted to see. But just kind of an example of that plant was not getting nitrogen at the right time. Tassel is a little too late, you're already seeing those deficiencies, it's already likely losing some yield. So, for example, probably need to apply nitrogen before tassel and corn. Corn takes up a lot of nitrogen in that rapid growth stage and starts around A6 up to tassel. So that's the first R. The second one is the right place. So that is just how you, or where you put the fertilizer in the field. So this picture, if you can maybe see, there's some white granules on top of the soil near the corn. That's urea fertilizer that was broadcast applied. So that's one example of placements of fertilizer. The goal is to always get the fertilizer to the plant roots so they can take it up. And so this, for example, would be slightly risky if there was no rain, if you're placing that fertilizer on top of the ground without incorporating or without a rain following. You can apply stabilizer, but there's still potential for volatilization or losses. So with any placement, it's important to understand, again, back to that nitrogen cycle, the potential losses, and think about the right place. And then if we think about the source, so that's the third R is right source. This picture is just an example of UAN being side dressed. So that's one source. And so you got to think about the type of fertilizer. Like I mentioned, ammonium or nitrate can both be in these fertilizers. Ammonium is a lot more stable in the soil, less likely to be lost. There's also a lot of different inhibitors or stabilizers you can apply at different times depending on the fertilizer you have. So really thinking about the source and what you're adding to the soil. And then also, I think about the other forms of nitrogen you can be adding, such as through manure, or if you have legumes that can have some nitrogen credits, considering all sources of nitrogen going into your field. And then last, but not least, is the right rate. I'm biased, but I believe this is probably the most important of the 4 R's when you're thinking about efficiency, especially with nitrogen, is applying the right rates on your field. This is also perhaps the most complex and difficult to determine. That's part of what NOPP focuses on the most. That's this picture is an example of one of the trials in some corn where you can see the lighter colors are that lower nitrogen rate, which is deficient in nitrogen. And from these trials, we can determine the economic optimum nitrogen rate, or the EONR. How many people have heard of that before, EONR? So that is the rate of nitrogen fertilizer that will give you the most profit. So based on the price of corn, the price of nitrogen fertilizer you're adding, and your yield response, that is the optimal rate that we recommend to give the most profitability. So with those 4 R's, these are something that farmers can investigate through NOPP. So with NOPP, we support Wisconsin farmers to optimize commercial nitrogen use on their own farms with their own equipment, and we have some goals. The first, and perhaps foremost, is to answer producer-specific nitrogen research questions. So we believe farmers probably know their fields the best. We think they can come up with some of the best questions to help them optimize their own operation. So we really lean towards farmers or producers to work on optimizing their nitrogen themselves. And so with that, we want to improve nitrogen management and nitrogen use efficiency, perhaps considering those 4 R's and understanding the nitrogen cycle. And we want to improve producer profitability. So like I mentioned, that's why we think about EONR, the rate that will maximize profit, And when farmers participate in these trials, we truly think we can help them in their profitability. And then of course, to also reduce nitrates in surface and groundwater through that as well. So I do want to give just kind of specifically in Rock County where we have some projects. So this is the program scope. This is the map of Wisconsin and all the trials that have taken place so far. So all the yellow circles are what have been completed in 2023, 24, and 25. And then we have quite a few current trials going across the state, and those are blue. So I highlighted some of the projects just in case some of you are familiar or would like to see some examples of what's happening in Rock County. But you can even see some of the surrounding counties have quite a few projects going on. Specifically, Dodge had a large producer-led project going on in the Rock River Basin. But currently, we have the Farmers on the Rock, so the producer-led watershed group in this county has a project where they're setting just the optimum nitrogen rate across 4 different producers. Pineview Dairy had a manure trial, so that was a statewide trial with multiple producers looking at manure versus no manure, or just the effect manure would have on the nitrogen rate. We have John McCarthy is doing a legume cover crop project, so that's where there's a cover crop going into the fields compared to no cover crop. And the cover crop has primarily legumes, which fix nitrogen and can add nitrogen to the soil, so we want to see how that impacts the nitrogen rate as well. And then some completed projects, we have Metcalf's Triple M Farms had a manure project, and then Tom Hoffman was a part of that big Rock River Basin project. And there might be more. Josh, do you happen to know if I'm missing any or any other projects happening in Rock County?
No, you've got them. There's one just across the border into Walworth that pairs up with the cover crop trial.
Yep.
But my work has multiple counties. So no, this is good.
Yeah, so I mean, we were definitely seeing a lot of initiative in Rock County to improve and fine-tune nitrogen use. So with all these projects, they're all very unique projects. They can be looking into many different things, but they have a common outcome. So this is the typical response we see is we create this nitrogen response curve. And this is looking at yields on the y-axis, graphed with the nitrogen rate applied on the x-axis. So through this, we're able to calculate the EUNR, like I mentioned, but also AUNR, and that is the agronomic optimum nitrogen rate. So that's the rate that maximizes yield. Like I mentioned, we recommend the economic optimum rates because we consider that price of nitrogen that you're applying and if that's really worth it versus the yield you're gaining. So we recommend the most profitable rate, and we're able to calculate that with this curve, and especially being able to measure the yield that the soil is able to, or that the field is able to achieve without any synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. So this is like the black box that I mentioned in the soil. The nitrogen cycling, there's always going to be some nitrogen put available by the soil itself. We just don't always know how much that's going to be or what that corresponds to with the yield. So measuring this point is really important to understand the soil supplying power of the field. So with this, you can also notice there's replication in here, there's randomization. We find that really important to be able to calculate these things and have more statistical power and confidence in the results we're getting. So with this, we also recently have put more of a water quality lens into the results we're sharing with the farmers. And so we've developed this calculation and estimation of unused nitrogen fertilizer. So what this is we know how much nitrogen is being applied to the fields, and we can estimate how much is being taken out of the fields or from the grain in the harvest. And then we can calculate how much of that fertilizer was not used. So these blue raindrops are an indication of that. At each of these nitrogen rates, how much fertilizer was potentially left out in the field. Some of that could be incorporated into that organic form, or it could be lost. So this could be susceptible to leaching or other loss pathways. So we find this an important thing to share because also in a lot of projects we'll notice that past the optimum rate, we're getting sometimes even exponential increases in the amount of unused nitrogen fertilizer. And so that's the more dangerous applications are when you're over applying and more of that nitrogen can be lost versus what is more of an acceptable level. So I wanted to share this graph, like I mentioned, with no applied synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, we get quite a variability in the yield response. So you can see from here the yields with no applied synthetic fertilizer can range from 50 bushels all the way up to 300 bushels an acre. So with this, you get quite a bit bit of a different response as well. So if you're more on this lower end, you can probably get, a lot of value out of applying more nitrogen fertilizer. You're gonna get more and more yields. But if you're already getting 300 bushels an acre with no fertilizer, you don't need to apply anymore. We see very flat responses. As you can see, unfortunately, nobody's getting 400 bushel an acre corn. But these are really important sites to know, is if you have really high yields to start, and perhaps that's due to a manure history, or there's a lot of site-specific factors that could contribute to that, you don't likely need to apply more synthetic fertilizer. Whereas if you're more in the bottom, it is more likely you might need to. But understanding this range and what yields you're able to get is one of the most important factors of these projects. And this is, again, why it's so difficult to have any sort of silver bullet baseline recommendation, because there is just so much variability in all the fields that we've done. And this is all just trials that we've done since 2023. This is the full data set with corn. But you can just see how variable that is and how difficult it would be to make a recommendation without knowing some of this. So I also wanted to put this graph up. So another important takeaway from NOPP and what we've seen is there is this approach that a lot of farmers and maybe even agronomists used to use. I think it's getting more outdated, but it's this yield goal approach where, based on how much you expect to yield, such as, if you're shooting for 200 bushels an acre, maybe you use a 1-to-1 ratio of like 1 pound of nitrogen fertilizer or 1 pound of nitrogen per 1 bushel of corn. So if you want 200 bushels, you'll apply 200 pounds. And we see that that's just not a good approach. So this graph is showing the yield versus the optimum nitrogen rate. And if you wanted to use that yield goal-based approach, you would see more of a 1-to-1 line, or you would see at least some sort of relationship. But here we're seeing just a blob of points for the most part. So that tells us there's no relationship between the optimum rate and yield, which is really important. This has been found in many studies, but this is specifically in Wisconsin fields over the last couple of years, and we're still not seeing anything. So that's something we want to take away from these projects is there's no, like I said before, there's no one answer, there's no right way to recommend nitrogen. That's why we have to keep studying it and researching it and be current in our recommendations. So with that, I just kind of want to end with this slide here where we're talking about the program itself and kind of the reach that we've had. So again, we focus on farm-driven nitrogen insights with a statewide impact. So to date, we've had 211 trials with 123 farmers and 100 collaborators. We do highly recommend collaboration. That's where we see a lot of success. These farmers working with other farmers, maybe in a producer-led watershed group, or otherwise agronomists, the county conservation, extension. Here mentioned Josh, who's been involved in many of these projects. It's really great to have collaborators supporting these farmers in these trials. So what we do in UW's role is to help support collective learning and engagement. We really believe that farmers often learn best from other farmers, or at least community members learn best from others in the community. So we have put on or been a part of over 100 outreach events. That includes field days, meetings, conferences, webinars, things like that. And to date, we've reached over 4,000 people. But again, this is still just kind of in the very beginning of NOPP and what we can all do. But we really focus on that peer-to-peer connection and learning. So we also want to integrate or collaborative efforts to support improved nitrogen management decision-making. And we can do that through many ways. Like Susan mentioned, the goal of these projects is to feed into the statewide database, which informs the nutrient application guidelines in 82809, and that also feeds into SNAP Plus, which is the nutrient management planning software. And we also include water quality indicators and are developing educational resources based on these trials and the data we're collecting. We're gaining quite a bit of information to estimate water quality indicators. And in general, this provides a lot of value for nitrogen management educational programming. From all these projects, there's a lot to look into and continue studying, but we take a lot of tests in all these projects. We measure PPNT, PSNT, we're looking at soil health indicators, so through these we're gaining a lot of educational value in developing those. And then lastly, just leveraging our research network to address additional questions. So a lot of times like I mentioned, we're partnering with people to measure the soil health tests and trying to correlate that to these nitrogen response curves. there's a lot of other research labs or people with additional questions that we can implement on these trials to gain as much as we can out of them. And I'll mention there's this QR code. Every year we put out an annual report, kind of just covering what NOPP has done in the past year, and more specifics about the projects themselves. And the NOPP has a lot of information on the website. Both UW and DACAP have a website on NOPP, so you can look at some of the results, you can look at the projects and some of the spotlight stories we have on those. But that is what we have for slides and a presentation today. And so I'd be more than willing to answer any questions, comments, concerns.
Okay, that does take us to item B, opportunity for questions and answers with the guests. Any questions or comments for the two? I have a couple. Maybe you said this at the beginning and I didn't catch it. How long has this been going on? Have you been doing this program?
So it started in 2023. Grants being awarded, so the first projects in the fields took place starting in 2023. Like we mentioned, they're 2-year projects. So the ones that started in 2023 wrapped up in 2024. And then 2024 new projects started. So some of them were their second year and some new ones started. So it's kind of a continual process.
Thank you. Also, earlier on, you mentioned denitrification, and I have a couple of questions about that. How is that caused and how widespread is that?
Yeah, so denitrification is when there's nitrate in the soil and the soil is saturated. So it's, waterlogged. There's no air, so it's anaerobic in the soil. And so microbes will denitrify that nitrate into nitrogen gas, which sometimes can be nitrous oxide. Sometimes it's also just N2 or other forms of nitrogen. And that happens usually if a soil is saturated for a couple days. It'll likely start happening then, but probably on every field, I think it's impossible to not have denitrification. Some of it happens every year. It just depends on how much, and largely depends on precipitation.
And can that happen year-round, or is that just specific to the growing season?
It depends on the moisture and the temperature. So the microbes are most active when it's probably above 50 degrees, but then also it has to be anaerobic for that to happen. And that can depend on the soil type as well. If you have a part of the field that's more likely to hold that water and not drain it, more of it can happen there.
Okay. And lastly, those huge rains we had a couple months ago, did that create this problem?
Could easily, yes. So when it rains, you have perhaps a lot of loss of nitrate. You can either get it leached if it's able to drain through the soil and have that nitrate there, and then also this denitrification can happen.
Thank you. Supervisor Schnecker.
Thank you, Chair. What is the biggest reason a farmer might give you, or do you hear a lot that don't want to participate? Like what, is there like a number one reason, like I don't want to participate in that?
The classic study that we've been doing is a in-rate trial, which with replication, which can take a lot of room on the farm. So that and a lot of work. It's a lot of work. There is a minimum award of $40,000 per producer to take that on, because we're recognizing that it is a lot of work and a lot of space on your farm. So that's one reason we've heard of complication. Some of these it's complicated to do this level of a scientific study on a farm, which is why partnering with UW Extension is a great thing to do. And a lot of agronomists are natural question askers and want to lay out research projects as well. So the partnering issue, if you can't find a partner, that's another reason why people are too much, can't do it all.
And then just one other thing, 123 farmers, can you give me an idea of a percentage, like what is that in the state? What does that represent across the state? Is it tiny, like less than 1%? Okay.
Yeah. Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, no, it was just wondering.
Yeah. And at this point, with a lot of the people who participated have been people who have been doing nitrogen research before NOPP even started on their own farms. So now they're like, I get paid to do this, great. But now we're trying to find ways to reach people who are interested and have questions but aren't quite ready for the full in-rate trial. For the next cycle, we're offering 2 different smaller versions. One is just putting 0 in strips. N. You know, one place on it, or two in a field? Two.
At least two.
Two, yes, and then the reduced N is 3. So a 0 N or reduced N in a field, lower, you know, it's about $6,000 maximum award there. So it's lower work, but it's a start, and it's getting information on your field, which I think is very valuable.
Other questions? Rick?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about how soil testing for nitrogen available or unavailable nitrogen in these trials, and also, not in the trials, just commonly, how much is soil testing for nitrogen done to determine, you know, an optimal rate?
I would say, I think not as much done as we would hope for. I would say it's not a very common thing for farmers to do themselves, but if an agronomist, it might be more likely. But we take these samples, like PSNT, like I mentioned, we take that on every single that's required for these trials, at least the full nitrogen rate trials, because we're building that database ourselves, and we're seeing a lot of the same correlation as the people who developed these as recommendation tools. So, you know, there's kind of a critical value where above that you don't gain any value in adding more nitrogen fertilizer. We're seeing that, but there are, you know, outliers, and I think it's really important for us to see that, investigate why. Maybe if you know, get a really high value, but you still add fertilizer and you see value. So we are investigating that. We're collecting data on that, and hoping to learn more. But like I mentioned, we're still going through that data. There's still a lot to be looked into for that.
And some of the projects are looking at different types of nitrogen testing, like the Haney test. There's some people who are very interested in that in terms of predictability for applying nitrogen later. So it's been interesting to see, again, different opinions and thoughts coming up.
Other questions?
Well, yeah, thank you, I do. Is there a way or a program where farmers can have their soil tested to decide whether they want to be in the program, or so that they know what they got? Maybe they're overdoing it, or maybe they're not, just by testing their soil without engaged into the program to find out.
The one program that I know that pays for soil testing is the Nitrate Management Farmer Education Program, which is either works with farmers to write their nutrient management plans, or a less formal setting, just an education type situation. But I think both tiers pay for soil testing. Not positive on that, but.
Dave?
Tissue sampling, how accurate is that? I've heard where you do tissue samples, if you don't apply it within so many days, you might as well not have to do the tissue samples because they change so often.
That's a great question. I don't have a great answer. A lot of the studies are testing that as well. It's not required, but I think there's a lot of interest in tissue testing, especially around maybe that tassel time or early B6 in corn. We don't have a lot of great information on that. I think it's so hard because tissue testing can vary based on if it's a really dry, part of the year, or if you just got a big rain or something like that. But what you're saying might be right. It might be, you need to take it and take action pretty quickly. A lot of people take these samples and then they kind of wait around or they're not sure, and that's most likely at least.
I thought we could make a study around that.
It's a great question.
Got to volunteer. Would you mind explaining what tissue sampling is for for me and others that don't know?
That's just, you go out and take tissue, leaves off the corn and stuff, you send them in, they test it for nitrogen in it, in the plant, see if it's deficient or not. So with there, you can kind of more your right time placement, so you can split it up and do stuff like that. I haven't seen a whole lot of benefit to it because it changes so quick. Like you said, get it rain or something the next day, it changes what's in the plant. I mean, the plant takes it up so quick that it changes so often that a few times we've done tissue sampling, but you can take a sample today, you can take one on Wednesday, and it's two totally different readings. So it's hard to apply on tissue samples.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments? Anybody? Seeing none, well, Susan, Megan, thank you very much. Very interesting. Are you coming back sometime with an update?
Yeah, sure can. We can come talk about the Rock County projects. We'll do that.
Sure, that'd be great. So thank you very much. Apologize for the phone going off. This is my first meeting ever.
Yes.
I've just got a couple copies of that. Next.
Oh. All right, item 6, county farm well sampling update.
Yeah, I've just got a couple copies I'm passing around. I'll just kind of hit some highlights here. I guess first of all, for those that aren't aware, county farm is basically everything northeast of here, north of Highway 14, and a little bit south of Highway 14. It's leased out. I think it's, what is that, a 5-year lease now? Mm-hmm. Leased out. The person with the lease is kind of, it's formed from this group, has to follow some best management practices for nitrogen. And we also installed monitoring well up gradients and a couple of down gradient wells. And we also have some transient non-community wells that are down gradient or side gradient. One just across the road here at the Sportsman's Park, one just across the low spot here, which is down gradient, that's a monitoring well. The transient non-community well is Sportsman's Park, and then there's 2 up by the stoplights up here, Compier Financial and the 51, was it 51, Station 51, I guess it's called now. It used to be Lions.
Oh,
yeah. So we've got some monitoring points there that we can look at the nitrogen, the nitrates. We were testing monthly, now we're testing every other month, because it's been fairly consistent from month to month. We look at water elevation trends, and we look at nitrate. So the elevation trends back in the 2019-2020, we had unusually record high elevations. Things have dipped down since then. Probably at the lowest since 2018 was this spring. And then we got the spring rains, and we saw a nice jump up in the elevations. And the most recent one we have is from June. We don't have the August values yet. I suspect it'll be similar in August, or maybe even up a little bit with the recent rains that we've had. So the other data that we collect is the monitoring well data for nitrates. We've seen a nice decrease over the last couple of years in nitrates for the monitoring wells on the down gradient side. One of our wells is out of service right now, but the other down gradient well has seen a nice decrease of about almost 2 part per million over the last couple of years. The up gradient well is all over the place, up and down. Up gradient of the up gradient well is less agriculture, so it's really what we're trying to measure is what happens across that county farm as the groundwater flows to the southwest. So yeah, the monitoring wells on the up gradients, the monitoring well on the up gradient side really is showing seasonal lows in the summer and highs in the winter, which is probably just a factor of groundwater flow time, but definitely an annual cycle going on there. The transient non-community wells at those facilities, the 2 up by the stoplights up here at 14 and 51 have shown a pretty sharp increase over the last year. Not sure what's going on there. However, Sportsman's Park across the road has seen a decrease. So typically we've seen pretty similar trends with those, but I'm not sure why we're seeing a divergence in one going down and the other two going up. Definitely not as high as they were back in 2018, where they're around, the two up by 14 and 51 were around 10, 11 parts per million. Now they're down around 8 or 9. So overall, since we've started all of this, we've seen nice decreases, but there is some variability from year to year. That's all I have for an update.
Questions for Rick? Anybody?
I got one.
Dave?
When's that second well gonna be up and running again? I mean, that's been, what, a year and a half?
Yeah.
2 years?
Yeah, that's on my plate, because I pay the bills.
Okay.
So yeah, it's on the list for sure. I know we want to get that back in the queue.
Yeah, we kind of left it for a while there because of all the construction going on with the new sheriff's department facility, but yeah, we need to get that.
Yep.
Probably have to excavate down about 5 feet.
Just in place of some moves.
Yeah, there's one of the joints, I think, is failing, and so we've got to excavate down and replace the upper part of the well casing.
And then another question, I know you said that we're at some lower rates from 2018. Countywide, well, testing, has that dropped at all, or gone up, or stayed steady, or?
Yeah, we saw a pretty good drop from that 2018 time period until the last couple of years, and then it's really leveled off. But we had a lot of public wells, transient non-community wells, so rural wells that have public going to them. We had a lot of wells that were between 10 and 20 and even over 20 parts per million. A lot of those wells with the funding that was out there were replaced. But we did see a pretty significant drop in nitrates over that period of about 4 to 5 years. Now it's stabilized a little bit more. So hard to put a cause and effect to it.
I just want to know if the trend is the same off what you're seeing off wells here versus.
Very similar. Yeah, very similar. Yeah. So overall, positive thing. There's a lot of factors. The climate, the rain, cover crops.
Snowfall.
We've definitely seen a lot more cover crops, which I think is certainly a potential for the decrease.
Sure.
Josh?
Rick, how many samples come in a year? You'll do sampling here. How many private well samples come in? Looking at least nitrate as one of the tests.
Yeah, nitrate tests, we generally get about 800 to 1,100 samples coming in on an annual basis. So, that'd be a good update to do to this group, is I'll give an update on what those trends are.
Okay.
For the private wells, and we also track those transient non-community wells that have been sampled every year consistently for going on almost 30 years now, so I can give an update of what those trends are. The private wells are a little bit more gray to interpret because it's not the same wells from year to year. Or those transient non-community wells, it's the same well we're sampling every single year, so it's good information.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be interested if, I don't recall, you probably have, but sharing the history of this, how we initially got involved. Did the state just come out with a grant and you could apply, or did we have a particular problem in this area of the state? And also, if you know how we compare in other areas of the state, or maybe even the nation, so we have a reference of where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, it really, we knew we had a nitrate problem in Rock County. Compared to other counties, we're kind of a hot spot for high nitrates. We had a lot of these public wells. We had some municipal wells, Janesville, for example, that had wells that went over the 10 part per million level, and they had to put in deep wells and cost a lot of money. So we always knew we had that problem, but really this group kind of formed out of a supervisor having a personal well that had high nitrates, and kind of pushed it a little bit to say, let's get a group going in the county to look at this, and that's where it formed. I think initially it was a 1 or 2 year committee, and it's just involved into everything that we are now.
2017 is the initiating resolution, and like Rick said, it started with a single ask, let's just say, and then turned into the idea of being proactive, right? Coming up with, these studies, and which has allowed us to have the partnership with Discovery Farms for that testing site. So the goal of, to complement the work that other agencies are doing, to be proactive about this, and rather than reactive to regulation. And to show that it's not, also to educate folks that it's a legacy issue too. It's not just what people are applying these days. It's, nitrogen persists in the groundwater, so it's not something that can be fixed. Even if people stop putting any nitrogen on, there's still going to be high nitrates in wells.
Supervisor Sutherland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rick, the wells that you mentioned that you've been testing for about 30 years, and then earlier on you were saying the lease that we have, that individual has to abide by a process or a system, so you're monitoring exactly what he's putting on. Before that, that was 2018 when that started? Were there any requirements when we leased the county farm that you knew what was going on as far as nitrogen or not?
I'll defer that one to you. I don't think there was anything formal, though.
No, if I recall, get my dates correctly, I think the county farm, they started leasing the land around 99, somewhere around there, late 90s anyways, when they decided to shut down the farm operations and go with the lease. And I do know for certain there was a few years that there was some issues with canning crops and harvesting, and it just kind of really made a mess of the place, to be blunt. And after that time is when they started looking at more, at least requiring a conservation plan. The lease specifically says no canning crops, because if you're familiar, that they just, the nature of that business is they come in and harvest when they need the crop and when the crop's ready. It doesn't matter if it's pouring rain. So just kind of really messed up things in terms of compaction. But yeah, since then, there's more restrictions, conservation plan, and then, right, it wasn't until this group started that there was more of the requirements for cover crops, a little bit more detail in terms of the requirements on the farm itself. And the landlord, or the tenant right now, is doing extra things on his own as part of some of these programs that aren't required, but he's utilizing a good portion of that land for some other trials and nitrogen work.
So I'm guessing there's a significant improvement of nitrates not leaching from doing now as versus when we were just releasing it out to the chemical.
Without the data, but yeah, there's 100%. Yeah.
Because you guys put the requirements in about 7 years ago is when Scott ran the first term?
Yeah, 7 or 8, because I think the lease was 3 years, and something like that. Yeah. So even the previous renter that had some requirements in terms of the conservation plan, and then when this group got started, it sprinkled in more, and we do through our budget, we pay for half of the cost of the cover crops. That's pretty expensive. It's thousands of dollars for that 300 acres of cover crops, and he does a nice job of timing the cover crops that he can even, it's corn and beans over there, but he can fly on the cover crops at the same time. So, to try to time it right, so you get the cover crops, to land where it needs to land at the right time of year, so it gets some growth in the fall.
Any other questions for Rick? Okay, let's move on to item number 7, UW Extension Project and Program. Update.
All right, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. Izzy is on as well, so I'll speak a little bit, and then maybe she wants to share some things as well. But my main touch is supporting the nitrogen projects that are going on in Rock County, working to recruit new farmers, as I see an opportunity and an interest. As Susan shared, being able to bring some grant dollars really helps for the extra time that we're asking farmers when it comes to planting and specifically putting out all these different nitrogen rates. So a project like we shared for the farmers on the Rock, it's kind of a simple trial, but yet there's 24 individual treatment blocks in their field. A lot of these can be anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 acre in size, so it does take a large piece of the field. And with certain equipment, it can be really, really fast, actually. One of the farmers is able to pre-program into their nitrogen application tool to turn the tool on and off and to adjust rates as he goes across the field. Whereas another farmer I work with had to get off the tractor every time to readjust the rate on the fertilizer pump between those 24 trials. So it's different based off of each farm and what they're set up for. But technology, as that advances, does make some of this research a little bit easier to set on some farms. And also then at the harvest time as well. A lot of times we can use the data that's collected from the combine as it's harvesting. So we don't need to necessarily weigh those individual plots as they're harvested. So it just kind of depends on how the farm is set up, but I really try to help support regardless. If it's a little more time, then I try to offer that so that the farmer can have some answers that they can use back on their own decision making. I'll just share a little bit. There'll be some more conversations coming forward. Andrew mentioned the Discovery Farms project in Rock County, and we talked about that back in April, actually. Izzy and Ellen were here to share that project with us, but that's at the Pat Malooly Farm down on the southeast side of Clinton, and really neat opportunity to measure the water that's moving through the soil profile underneath those growing crops. So as that project matures here, in another year, as that soil settles more, there's going to be some different practices, some treatment A, treatment B type practices, so we can really understand. And that's what we're, hopeful to learn from these trials is what we make for a management change for those 4 R's. Well, how does that impact potential leaching of nitrogen into the groundwater? So having that system set up is a really neat opportunity. I believe, if I remember right, there's maybe only a couple of those in the state. So a really cool opportunity for Rock County to have access to that. With that goal then of being able to do research there for multiple years, it's a system that should have a lot of stability on that farm. I'm gonna pause there, see if Izzy wants to share just a few more things. I think, Izzy, your work with the irrigation water would be useful, or any other updates that you had.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much, Josh. And thanks everybody for having me. I'm Izzy McNamee. I know there's one new person in the room, maybe. And I'm with the Ag Water Program at UW Extension. And so we work with farmers on ways to reduce their nutrient losses, including nitrate. And so what we're doing in Rock County specifically again this year is our program is offering free irrigation well testing to farmers, and then working with them on ways that they can kind of harness that nitrogen that is already in their irrigation water and maybe think about dialing back on their fertilizer applications. So if they get their irrigation well nitrate concentration and say it's 20 parts per million, and they apply 7 inches of irrigation water, thinking about how many pounds of nitrogen that actually is, and maybe they can dial back on their fertigation applications. Overall, the idea is to get people thinking about how much nitrogen is coming in and how much is leaving a field in your system, and how to get more efficient about that. And so it's really exciting to have all the growers that participated last year are participating this year in Rock County, and we're expanding our program to other areas of the state as well. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you.
That completes my report.
Thank you, Josh and Izzy. Item 8, producer-led watershed group update.
I guess I can start with that. The grant application process for 2027 is open now, so the producer group will be working to get their grant application in by the September 15th deadline. The producer-led grant program has become quite popular, so it's becoming more competitive. The group is doing a really good job of demonstrating their participation in education and research projects, but they're looking for methods and ways to connect with outside groups to help maybe get some cost share funding with them, just to demonstrate that they can stay on for the long haul, basically, without a reliance on 100% funding through this grant program. They just had a field day last Tuesday. Maybe Josh, if you'd like to speak towards that, you kind of worked with them to set that up a bit.
Yeah, so it was over just off of Highway 14 in County O. Hughes Farms has a site there, and we looked at the weed zapper that Hughes use. So it is exactly what it sounds like. It's a electrically charged metal bar that they hold above the crop canopy, and when it touches weeds, it sends that voltage down through the weed and kills it. So a really interesting weed management tool that they're using in some of their food grade and their organic crops. But as we develop, and we're seeing it, and we expect it to continue, more resistance to herbicides, it could be a tool that maybe is used in other operations as well. So it did have a weed management focus to the day. That's as you're putting together these programs, we try to think about what's on farmers' minds. We had a cover crop section as well to talk about some of the decision making that farmers might be going through this time of year behind small grains and then ahead of their fall harvest. And then also on that weed management side, Hughes has brought up one of their combines, and we know that that's a tool that as it's harvesting in the field, it's also harvesting weed seed. So one of our UW specialists talked about like how to, if we've harvested a field that has quite a bit of weed seed pressure in it, where are the key spots that we could spend 20 minutes to clean this combine before we're heading to the next field, try to really mitigate that spread of weed seed. So that's kind of the focus of this last meeting. But yeah, we have presentations and programs that are across the board, from nitrogen management type conversations to nutrient decision making. That was the focus this spring at the annual meeting, just with a lot of the cost versus opportunity that was involved this spring, where we really need to dial in to help be profitable but yet efficient. Thanks, Casey.
Anything else, Casey?
That's all I have at this time.
Questions, anybody? Okay, we're on to item number 9. Next meeting date and time will be October 26th, 2026. That's 8 o'clock right here.
I guess if the group would still like, I have a few people lined up. I don't have anyone specifically for October yet, but in January, Sue Swanson agreed to come and give an update. The Geologic Survey had done some work across Rock County, She thought that'd be a really good timing, so I have her kind of penciled in for that timing. I did reach out to some DNR state specialists, if they'd be willing to talk about like nutrient application, thinking like biosolids and those sorts of products, you know, that are not synthetic fertilizers. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get them to come in that October time frame, because there's a lot of that across the county. But if the group would still like, if they appreciate the presentation, I'll continue to get those scheduled.
Yeah, we appreciate that, Josh.
Sounds great. Okay. Item number 10, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Dave, RJ, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you to our guests, Izzy.
Thanks,
Susan, and
Izzy.
Megan.
Thank you.
Yeah.